went into work at the height of this pandemic. I mean, it's outrageous if it happened in any other country.
I've talked about it already. Yeah.
And we, the workers, are not going to stop. Now, they can. It shows how desperate this government is when they are trying to criminalise the very people that are keeping the country open and working.
Okay, Deirdre, thank you very much indeed. Tom has called from Basingstoke. Hello, Tom.
I agreed a lot of what she said there, Sheila. Hi. The point I was looking to make was, though I think everyone's made it a bit already, but this connection between corruption and just basically everything's broken and inefficient. That's two sides of the same coin to me. We don't say of other countries, oh yes, they've got a very corrupt government, but gosh, don't things run well? You know, the fact that, you know, things don't run well in this country anymore compared to what they used to, I think they're linked. And if you have that acceptance of corruption, and there's always been corruption, I'm sure, but I think, as you've said and other callers have said, they're very blatant about it now, it seems. You know, there's no great comeback on Johnson's lies and all the other things, and the Hancock and the PPE and all the other things you've quite rightly mentioned. I don't think they're just, there's two things going on sort of here. They are connected. If you have a corrupt system, a corrupt government, you get inefficient services, you get bad public service, you get, you know, corruption at every level.
You do, but it's the lack of functionality of the services, isn't it? That's the most worrying, because it's, you know, we've seen it in probation, we're seeing it daily in the health service, we're seeing it in education. It's because they're being hollowed out by a hollowed out government.
Well, go back to the austerity question and everything else. Yes, I mean, it's not in the Tories' interest to have successful public services. It's in their ethos. I mean, I don't think it used to be. I think, you know, the party has clearly changed. I'm a Labour supporter, so I am biased, but, you know, I'd give them their due that, you know, it wasn't, at least they got things done, and maybe not always agreed with everything, but now it seems, like you say, the services have been hollowed out. They loved austerity. They thought it was the right thing to do from almost not a moral, but whether, you know, a conviction process. I mean, there's those guys that all these senior politicians trust and the rest of it that wrote this book. I'm going off my point now, but wrote this book about, you know, the way the Britannia reclaimed or something, whatever it was called, you know, and it's all, you know, Javid.
Britannia Unchained.
That's the fella. Javid, you know, who became Health Secretary, has written about how we should have a private sector, and now he's coming back to it again, saying we should pay for doctors' services. It does seem as an agenda. I don't overly believe that it's a massive, all joined up conspiracy. I think it's just a flow, and I think they've almost been more successful than they believed. I think they even in their wildest dreams, they couldn't imagine they'd break the NHS the way they have. Maybe they've overachieved in this one thing they've overachieved.
I often wonder whether universal child benefit, getting rid of that was a little practice run for what they could get away with elsewhere in the welfare state.
Oh, it's funny you say all that. I've just started training for citizens' advice, and you start realising all these nuances in the old legacy benefits to the new universal credit, and you start seeing that's a bit harsh. Oh, that's a bit strange, or didn't know that was the rule, you know, because who knows the full benefit system. But it's a real eye-opener.
Well, you mentioned you're a Labour supporter there. I'm going to talk after 2 about this latest survey. You know the survey that's a kind of word soup that people are asked.
Oh, about Keir
Starmer don't know.
You find it on the doorstep a bit. I think we had a presentation from a Labour MP at the local party meeting a few months ago, and he said one of the problems is that Labour still have this thing of looking over their shoulder. And what he meant by that was you couldn't just make a statement without having to check is it in NEC policy and everything else, whereas Johnson and co could say what the hell they liked. And the previous lady said
why could they say what the hell they liked?
Because the right-wing press will back them up. They haven't got that same party structure. They won't be chastised by trade union leaders or people on the left about not being completely on message.
No, but they'll tear each other's eyes out left and right.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's internecine warfare in Labour. It's hardly new, is it? So I agree. I think he's a better man than, you know, everyone gives him credit for. I hope that he gets more exposure and therefore he can loosen up a bit. I think that's the bit. I think the other point is that a lot of people who way off subject now, Sheila.
No, it's all right.
A lot of people in the the party still think that everybody watches Newsnight and listens to your sort of programme and the rest of it. People aren't. They're watching Love Island and reality TV and they don't care. So he can make great speeches and he can tear...
well, I'd like to point out over 1 million people a week are listening to mine.
Well, that's great, but that's 1 million out of 670 million.
I know, all right, I'm working on it, Tom. I'm working on it.
You're working on it.
Spread the word for us, would
I
you?
would say it's naive to expect that everybody is taking on, a good speech or like I say, performance at PMQs. I think we've got to start. What's that thing about the Salvation Army? You start using the devil's tunes. We need to start our not using the same tactics of lying. And there is evidence of the lying. I'll come to that in a second if you want me to. But the fact
we don't want to be lying. No, I think.
No, but we want to put the message across in words and sentences that people understand, and not be thinking, I've got to... Well, first, he's a very trained lawyer, but he still sort of talks like a lawyer. And, maybe we need to get just roll your sleeves up and get more basic with people. Put the message across, be bolder.
A bit more Angela Rayner.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some great people on the front bench now, and I think if they had their head... I mean, I'd say about the lying thing, there's an interesting piece that was done on the last election that something like 7 out of 8 Tory party statements on Facebook were I think I forget exactly how they phrased it now, but basically weren't true. And that was done by an independent body that was looking into it. So,
on that business of being a bit more brutal, you're talking a bit about sort of brutality and laser-sharp politics is what you want to see from Keir Starmer, isn't it?
as well, just to stop looking like you're a civil servant.
Well, it was interesting in PMQs yesterday, and I must finish in a sec, but when he really laid into... sorry, not yesterday, on Wednesday. He really laid into Rishi Sunak and he said, "Oh, is the job too much for you? Is it all a bit too much for you? You want a bit of that, do you?"
Well, the attack route on Sunak is this thing of he's too weak to do the job.
So stick at that, maybe. Stick at that, yeah. And then he keeps coming back with the attack about Corbyn, doesn't he? Which is that's his set piece in a crisis. Thank you, Tom. Tom in Basingstoke. We're going to talk about which policy you think of when you think of Keir Starmer, and that research that I'll tell you more about in a minute came back as don't know, but we'll talk about that after 2. Continuing with your calls on whether Jeremy Hunt is right to say people don't care about ministers' personal tax affairs. Yes, they do. 148.
Join me, Andrew Castle, here on LBC. If people felt confident that their money was being spent wisely and that the services that their tax money, their hard work and sweat is actually supposed to be going towards, if it's working well, if public services are delivering, then I'm sure people will be more minded to accept the highest tax rates in 70 years. But at the moment, it doesn't feel like the country's working. Join me, Andrew Castle, tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player, LBC.
At Kia, we believe to find inspiration, you have to move. Our Kia Inspire event features exclusive offers on selected models like the Kia Exceed, Sportage, Stonic and Picanto. Get your first 2 services free, 7.9% APR representative and up to £2,500 PCP deposit contribution. Plus, these models will be available sooner than you think. Search Kia Inspire event. Kia, movement that inspires. T's and C's apply. Petrol models only. Kia Finance ends 28th of February.
If you've lost £3,000 or more in a scam or fraud, then tell CEL. CELsolicitors.co.uk specialise in confidential, no-win, no-fee fraud and scam recovery. Whether you were pressured by someone posing as a bank, HMRC or even the police, if you have been scammed, don't let them get away with it. Let us help you try to get your money back. We listen, we care, we win.
Got an untaxed car? You could hide it in a hedge or sneak it in a skip. Maybe cloak it with some cones or outfox us with a fence. You might try to cover it, smother it, bury it in sticks, park it down the lane, tuck it down the drain, stash it in a bus stop, paint it like a mountaintop. But whatever you try, you will always find that cars are hard to hide, but easy to tax. So don't risk it. Tax it with DVLA at gov.uk/DVLA/taxit.
This is a message for every household in the UK. Everyone is entitled to government help with the cost of living. At gov.uk/help for households, you'll find over 40 different support schemes in one place. From help with energy bills to childcare costs, housing, transport, and more. Help is available now for every household. See what you're eligible for at gov.uk/help for households.
Experience. It's knowing that Saga Travel Insurance has your back wherever you go. With Saga, you're covered for up to £10 million of emergency medical expenses. You can relax in an airport lounge if your flight is delayed by over an hour. Plus, receive same-day payments when making a claim. Simply search Saga Over 50s Travel Insurance for a quote today. Saga Travel Insurance. Experience is everything.
Same-day payments made if approved before 4 p.m. UK time. Register your flight 6 hours before departure. Provided by Astrenska Insurance Limited.
Oof, winter, rain, dropping temperatures. Now if you too were to drop south, you'd discover a different kind of winter. Imagine the warm sun on your back, a stroll to the beach, enjoying it. Not all winters are the same. Fly to Spanish Sunshine from $30.99 with Welling Airlines. T's and C's at welling.com or on our app.
Breathless after minor physical activity? Feeling exhausted with swollen ankles? It could be a potential symptom of heart failure. Speak to your GP, who might suggest a simple blood test to help diagnose it or rule it out.
Pumping Marvellous's Beat HF campaign and Fighting Failure from Novartis are working together to raise awareness of heart failure. Find out more at pumpingmarvellous.org.
Sponsored and funded with editorial input by Novartis UK.
Sheila Fogarty on LBC.
Right, Jinder has called from Chertsey. Hello, Jinder.
Hi there.
Fire away. Fire away.
Well, so I suppose I'd want to caveat this with that I know a lot of the callers are coming in now with indignation about this particular government and these sleaze and the scandals that have followed them around. But it's kind of like easy to forget that all governments have had, maybe not as many, but certainly issues within their own parties at the time they've been in government. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously, like, everyone's kicking off now about Conservative, and I'm not Conservative or a Labour. I'm never actually voting, because I just feel that everyone's going to basically just do the opposite of what they say anyway. So it's kind of just, and I know that's probably not the best way to be either, but I'm of the opinion that I'd rather not vote for the guy that's going to kick me in the teeth, or the woman that's going to kick me in the teeth.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand your despair at politics, but I don't think it's entirely true to say they never do what they say they would do. They do.
Into a legal war.
Yeah,
no one's kicking off about that. I mean, obviously,
well, they did. They did for years, and
forgotten though, right? Because
no, they haven't forgotten, and he'll never be. He can never be let forget. Did he?
Yeah. Well, I don't see him in prison.
Oh,
how many people died under his watch?
You think he should be in prison?
Absolutely. I mean, if you take, can you imagine if I went into someone's house and slaughtered a family? And what's the difference of me giving an order to send soldiers in to someone's house to slaughter them while they sleep? It's the same thing, right? We did it under the guise of weapons of mass destruction. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever came of it. There was an inquiry. He said, well, I did it in good faith, and that was the end of that.
Insufficient.
I don't see anything. And in terms of what that's done damage to this country,
and to the world with the subsequent...
And the world, we talk about our home first, right? And then, that's the thing. These governments in general it just sits in bed with sleep. I mean, let's not forget the the way the British Empire grew so quickly and so incredibly well was the fact their number one export at the time was corruption. Going to these countries and stealing the seeds of corruption within the country allowed them to take over, and with a view to mediate the whole ethos of divide and conquer was perfected by the British.
You paint a picture of somebody who simply loathes the country you live in, the people who run it.
No, I think this country can do fantastic things. Obviously, and let's not forget where they got those things from. It's not just, this is the problem right now. I think with the current generation, people have forgotten just how America, Germany, the UK, and a lot of the Western society actually got their wealth. So the wealth they're squandering right now wasn't developed through hard work and innovation. It's just here in those countries.
Well, it wasn't. Not only that. I mean, I know what you're alluding to, but not only that.
No, I'm not saying only that either. but the vast majority has been taken from other countries. And remember, the UK was just as complicit in the slave trade as the Dutch, the Americans.
Yeah.
That's when we talk a lot about it about the Americans.
So where does this? So where does this leave you then? Do you just regard yourself as, because you can't, even though you're not voting and you're very critical of the politics and the politicians of this country, whichever party, you can't separate yourself from it, because decisions that are made in Westminster affect you, me, and everybody else.
The last one made a really good point, and he said, when you have a corrupt system, you're going to get corruption. And I think that's the problem. Like, let's be honest, all as human beings, we've all gotten away with something, whether it be minuscule to the point where we're not going to go to prison over it. It might be, registering your tax in your car a few weeks late to save yourself 1 month, or something like ridiculous like that. So not something that you've done deliberately, but it's things that we've all done. If we added all those things together, then suddenly that's quite a lot of money.
Well, having forgotten to tax my car a few times at the right time, I can tell you still have to pay retrospectively what you didn't pay. So it doesn't save you.
I know now it doesn't, but historically it was.
I don't know.
The digital system. Yeah, before the digital system. When we had the old tax disc, I know to remember those. And that's how it was. You could basically do little things like that, and it saved you a couple of quid. And everyone did it. Or taking a job and doing it cash. Basically like when we were kids, etc. Like, at university, I'd go take some cash job, mow the garden with someone, and take a cash job.
So what changes it, Jinder? What changes it if people like you just sit back and say, I'm not playing. I'm not playing. If you don't play, and only corrupt people play, it never changes, does it?
Well, no, everyone gets corrupted though. The system corrupts you. They say the ultimate power.
No, that's not true that everybody gets corrupted. It just isn't. Not even in Westminster, Jinder. Jinder and Chertsey, thank you. Kenny's call from Tarpley. Hello, Kenny.
It's funny you should be mentioning paying things late. I was due to pay a VAT bill in December on the 7th, and I woke up on the morning of the 8th about 2 o'clock, remembered I had to pay it, and I sent the money, and I just had to pay a fine for it, over £1,000.
Wow.
And I spoke to them, not interested. And I got through very easy when you want to give people money with these organisations. But with Johnson, I don't think Johnson was the start of the rot. I think Johnson was the start of us seeing it. And they're so brazen, though. They do things they shouldn't do. They disappear for a bit of time, and then they show up a few years later, and they're back up. Like the last that gave us a £40,000 back that was claimed within the spirit, within the rules, but out with the spirit. She's she's got her face back on the telly again, and they all just they don't have no shame.
Who's that? Who are you talking about?
I can't remember her name now. I can't remember it, but I was walking the dog on Sunday, and I was listening to David Lammy speaking to some woman who was absolutely skint and having a bad time, and he was empathising, and he said, I was really upset. I thought, what a nice guy. If only all politicians could be like David Lammy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so I thought, I'll just have a little look up this guy. And the website I found, if it's correct, David Lammy claimed...
Well, hang on, the website, if it's correct, so be careful what you next say, because I can't confirm it at this point.
Well, I said if it's correct. David Lammy claimed £230,000 expenses, 21-22. So it's not just the Tories, it's the Labour, and I don't think it's going to make a lot of difference to us at the coalface. We're all working hard, we're all trying to fill up the coffers, and how can you have a job?
Well, Kenny, on that, just because I'm just doing my job, on that, we'll obviously check that figure, but on that, those expenses won't just be for him. They'll be for his, is my guess, they'll be for his office, they'll be for the people he employs.
Listen, this is not aimed at David. I like David Lammy. What I'm saying is...
No, how can you like or dislike him, I'm just doing my job.
How can you have a job that pays you £80,000 a year or £85,000 a year, and your expenses are £200,000 tax-free?
Because you haven't listened to what I've just said. My strong guess is that those expenses involve his office, in his Westminster office and his London office, and his political staff. That would be my strong guess, but we will check, and we can check that very easily. Thank you very much, Kenny. Kenny in Tarpley. We're going to stick with the Labour Party actually for this next hour, and specifically Keir Starmer. Redfield and Wilton Strategies, a polling company, do these really interesting polls and present the findings as a kind of picture board of words. I think liar was Boris Johnson's, wasn't it? Keir Starmer's word, or words in this case, is don't know. don't know. What policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer? People said, don't know. What about you? What policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer?
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 2 o'clock, a hospital trust has been fined £800,000 after admitting failings which led to the death of a baby. Winter Andrews died in 2019, 23 minutes after she was born at the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham due to lack of oxygen to the brain. An inquest found she could have lived if staff had acted sooner. The baby's mother, Sarah, says no financial penalty will ever bring back her daughter.
Sadly, we are not the only family harmed by the Trust's failings. We feel that this sentence isn't just for Winter, but it's for all the other babies that have gone before and after her.
The Chancellor says the HS2 rail link should reach its Euston terminus. Today's Sun has reported the high-speed line could terminate in West London's suburbs because of soaring costs. It said a redeveloped station in the centre of the capital might not open until 2038 and could be scrapped completely. Jeremy Hunt says the government is committed to delivering on HS2.
I don't see any conceivable circumstance in which that would not end up at Euston. We have not got a good record in this country of delivering complex, expensive infrastructure quickly.
A teenager has been jailed for 11 and a half years for encouraging terrorism. Daniel Harris, who's 19 and from Glossop in Derbyshire, posted far-right videos online that were linked to mass murders in the United States. New Zealand's largest city has declared a state of emergency after torrential rain prompted widespread flooding. The downpour in Auckland has moved houses and cut power to homes and businesses. An Elton John concert, expected to be attended by 40,000 people, was cancelled due to unsafe conditions. The King and Queen Consort have lit candles at Buckingham Palace to remember those who suffered during the Holocaust. Memorial events are taking place up and down the country to mark the anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camp at Auschwitz. Survivors are urging people not to stay silent about anti-Semitism. Alfred Goldberg was freed from a German camp in 1945 and says education on the atrocity is critical.
It would be extremely dangerous and have consequences if the Holocaust was relegated to just a footnote in history. It is absolutely vital to make people aware of what hate can lead to.
In the city, a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 2 points at 77.63. The pound buys $1.24 and €1.14. LBC weather, sunshine for some this afternoon, especially in the west, generally cloudy elsewhere. A high of 8 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Sheila Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you. In the way that Boris Johnson made his entire persona just before he became Prime Minister about Brexit, it's something people could hang their hat on, isn't it? It was all Brexit, 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 let's get Brexit done, let's get Brexit done. So in terms of the electoral success he achieved, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it was down to that. He is a very defined character politically, isn't he? Keir Starmer less so. It doesn't mean he won't succeed, but less so. And this polling firm I mentioned a few moments ago even, Redfield and Wilton Strategies, global market research and polling company, they do these polls where the results are presented as a kind of word soup, a picture with words all over it, and the main finding, or the main survey finding, is plunked front and centre at the middle of the picture. You might remember the one for Boris Johnson with lots of words about how people perceived him, and I'm afraid the biggest word in the middle was liar. Well, with Keir Starmer, when asked what policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer, so these are like word association questions, what policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer? Let me tell you some of the smaller numbers of people who said certain things. So not much on housing, sitting on the fence, energy, unions, Labour's education, equality, poverty, fairness. So they were the smaller findings. They're in smaller words around the big central two words front and centre on this sort of picture finding, and the words are don't know. So we heard from a caller 15 minutes ago, didn't we, on the programme, who's a Labour voter, a Labour supporter, sounds like he canvasses for Labour as well, who kind of accepts that is where the Labour leader is in people's minds at the moment. But we are, all things being equal, 2 years away pretty much from a general election. Well, enter Nicola Sturgeon at this point. She described the Labour leader in a conversation with Lewis Goodall of the newsagents. She described the Labour leader as a pale imitation of the Tory party. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Well, I don't know how you can go from being the Keir Starmer that I and the SNP worked with over Brexit when Theresa May and Boris Johnson were Prime Minister, to be somebody who now won't even countenance the possibility of going back into the single market and say you've got principles. But if I was in Labour, and I'm not, so I'm having to imagine myself into this position, what would worry me if I was south of the border in Labour more than anything right now is, Labour, you said it seems inevitable that Labour win the next general election. One of the things I've learned over many years in politics is you never treat anything as inevitable. And if I was in Labour, I'd really worry about the whole just be the pale imitation. Because that's not, why would people vote for the pale imitation? He needs to have a bit more principle, a bit more difference, and actually a bit more guts to take on the Tories and to take on the right-wing media.
Well, you can hear that conversation in full from 5 when the newsagents drops. Nicola Sturgeon in conversation with Lewis Goodall. When Keir Starmer, along with Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, spoke briefly to James earlier on, James O'Brien, this is what Keir Starmer said in reaction to those comments from Nicola Sturgeon.
Can I firstly gently suggest to Nicola Sturgeon that she might want to roll up her sleeves and concentrate on the health service in Scotland, which is, we're talking about the ambulance crisis here, been an ambulance crisis in Scotland for a very long time, the military driving the ambulances even last year, the education system's on its knees. So I think that Nicola Sturgeon may want to spend a bit of time fixing some of the problems that are actually under her control in Scotland. But on the general point, James, and you and I discussed this before many times. We've left the EU now and there is no case for going back in, but that doesn't mean that the deal that we've got is a good deal. It's a bad deal. It wasn't oven ready, it wasn't cooked, it's a very bad deal. And we need to improve on that and have a closer trading relationship with the EU.
That's Keir Starmer, as you can tell. So I'm going to put the same question to you. What policy do you most associate with Keir Starmer? Chris has called already on this from Alton in Hampshire. Hello, Chris.
Hi. I suppose the one thing that has come across is that he wants to be not Jeremy Corbyn. And that, in my view, is not a policy, and it's also not a very sensible strategy, because he's now left himself open to the accusation he gets every week in question time, answers questions, that he supported Jeremy Corbyn. But I didn't vote for him in the leadership election, but I was prepared to take him at his word that he wanted to unite the party around a radical set of policies which would tackle the problems in the British economy. But what he's actually done is he's wasted 2 years attacking people inside his own party, losing over 100,000 members, either because they're disillusioned or being expelled for ludicrous reasons. And he's run away from just about every issue where he could have taken a stand.
Which reasons? Which ludicrous reasons?
That are going to be required if Labour does win an election are going to be opposed tooth and nail by the right-wing press and the Conservatives and large parts of the establishment and wealthy people who are going to kick up a hell of a fuss. And he's done no groundwork in preparing the country for that. He's distancing himself
Hang
from people on strike.
Let me ask you, what do you mean specifically by that? Because if Labour are in power and he has a big majority, these are big ifs because, as Nicola Sturgeon was saying, none of this is inevitable. If they're in power and have a big majority, the one Boris Johnson did and then squandered, if he gets the legislative programme he wants to get through, yes, people will criticise. Some people will criticise it. Some people will say he's this, that, and the other. But he'll get it through.
But he's not got it in the manifesto.
He's rewriting the manifesto. He's rewriting it.
Yeah, and he's rewriting it to take out nearly all of the things which were good about Jeremy Corbyn's programme.
Well, in your view, but he'd like to win an election, and Jeremy Corbyn didn't.
Well, I think the reason Jeremy Corbyn didn't win in 2019 was Brexit.
It's because he didn't get enough votes. But there's always a reason. There's always a political policy and a reason that means you don't get elected.
But the Brexit thing was a very particular set of circumstances. A much better guide to what might have happened at the next election is the 2017 election, where the radical policies that Labour put forward were very popular.
But still
in 2019, that was completely swamped by the debate over Brexit.
But you still lost.
People weren't voting in 2019 about the government's proposed policies for the economy.
But in both elections, Labour lost, led by Jeremy Corbyn. So if the new leader, Keir Starmer, wants to take the party in a different direction, it's quite within his rights to do so. He's made it clear that they're rewriting a manifesto for the times we are now in.
Actually, he made it clear that he made 10 pledges about what the kind of policies he was going to pursue were going to be, and he's reneged on almost all of them.
So, in a word or two words?
Well, untrustworthy, spineless.
Okay, we'll leave it at those two. Thank you, Chris. Chris in Alton. Elizabeth is called from Windsor. Hello, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I'm just listening to this. I've been listening to the last programme as well. So today's Holocaust Memorial Day, and I would say the one thing that Keir Starmer is trying very hard to do is to remove the stain of anti-Semitism off from the Labour Party. Because, when Jeremy Corbyn was Prime Minister, was in charge, was the head of the Labour Party, we had lots of anti-Semitism, and it's still a problem there. But the thing about Keir Starmer, is that I've got barristers in my house, and he comes from Doughty Chambers. He's a very respected QC. Well, he's now KC now. And so I think barristers have a hard time being like Boris. And he will be.
I don't know.
That's possibly the problem.
I don't know. I think it's a character thing, isn't it? There's plenty of exuberant barristers in this world.
It depends what they're doing. It depends whether they're all different. It depends what kind of law they're doing. Because I've got a chancery one, it's quite square. But the problem, the problem with the Labour Party actually is that I'm a senior nurse tutor and IT, and my husband's a retired cardiologist. And I would say, though, Labour needs to get on their knees and start saying all the problems in the NHS are related to this government, because actually the cutting of the beds was done by 2006 by Sir Alan Milburn and Simon Stevens, who went on to be the head of NHS England, who we saw running around a lot during COVID. Mm-hmm. They cut 25% of the NHS beds by 2006. They they closed down, so in the Windsor area in East Berkshire, they closed the top special care baby unit. They closed, we had one of the top GP maternity units in Wickham Hospital. They shut that. Then they opened, and so if you live in Marlow, you have to then drive all the way to Aylesbury because there was no facility.
And Labour's PFI policy, I know the Tories continue to do it, hasn't been a resounding success by any means, has it?
Well, that is a real, because it used to cost £800 to change a light bulb. You couldn't do anything, but there's plenty other things as well. I went to a meeting in 2004 because I was interested, called the New Health Economy, and it's being run by Simon Stevens, and I can't remember the health economist who advised Labour all the time, his name. And they had the room. I thought, this is going to be very interesting for NHS people, academics, doctors. No, I was the only nurse.
Is it Ian Kennedy you're thinking of?
No, I'm not. No, this was being run by Simon Stevens, because Simon Stevens was Blair's advisor. He then went on to Simon Stevens worked with Alan Lawburn as health secretary under Labour,
and then went on to run NHS England. Yeah.
Yeah, when he came back. So but he put in nice. He then what they did then. So he was running this day, and the room was full of the private sector. And there's one person from the Oral College of Physicians, one person from the BMA, and myself, and that's all. And at the end of it, he said, listen to this, he said, okay guys, by 2008, we are planning to outsource 25% of the NHS work into the private sector, start bidding. So all this business of the privatisation of the NHS by the Conservatives, which is a narrative that is popular, is not true. As we were, he also...
All right, Elizabeth, I feel like I'm getting a history of the NHS in the last 30 years, according to Elizabeth in Windsor. And what I really want from you, thank you for that, but what I really want from you is what policy you think of when I say the name Keir Starmer. Go on, have a go.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, go on then, say it.
The anti-Semitism. And the other thing he's harping on about now, the non-dom status. If we got rid of, and this non-dom status is only for the uber-rich.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.